a degree in environmental resources engineering from Humboldt State University. And so I kind of came from an environmental background and worked in construction for the Port of Seattle as an engineer for 12, 15 years, something like that, before I moved on to other endeavors. But I've been operating my own private business since about 2009. And so I do, or used to do, I'm not doing it anymore, consulting design work for small projects. But then I also did a lot of environmental volunteer work, either pro bono or low bono, where I'd get paid a little bit or something like that. And so I've been helping out environmentally in Snohomish County now for well over almost 20 years or better. I was involved in forest practices with the Pilchuck Audubon for quite a few years, and so I've had some successes. I've had some losses. Losses I don't agree with, but we live with them. Uh, what I'd like to talk today about is Perrineville Creek and the city of Edmonds' liability and really the hazard to Puget Sound and to the citizens in around Talbot Road, where Perrineville Creek enters the sound. Is it possible for me to go ahead and share the screen?
Let me make that possible for you. I'm sorry, Bill. Just do me. Give me a second here.
That I've got a PowerPoint that I did for the appeal hearing a year ago last February, and I've updated it a little bit, and I also cut out some of the slides that I didn't think you'd be too terribly interested in. So I tried to stick to the meat of the issues. And so if I could get the screen here to share.
Just hang on.
Yeah,
I'm
sure,
working
go
on it.
ahead.
Don't go too fast here. Just let me make sure that I can um, make you a co-host, and then I can.
Okay.
All right, now feel free to share. You're gonna may have to back out of what you already started and go back to. Sorry, I should have done that to get go.
You see my screen now?
No, I'm just seeing the Zoom screen right now on my computer. I'm not sure about you. There you go.
Okay,
Now,
you got me now?
now we're with you.
Okay, great. All right. Okay, I call this kind of dithering equals disaster, nice engineering formula. This is to me a real big problem with uh, with the city of Edmonds and just the overall issues that are going on in Lower Perrineville Creek. This picture was from December 2020, where the city crew worked all night to prevent the railroad tracks from washing out because of their undersized, structurally deficient system that they have there for stormwater. This map here shows the brown line shows the watershed. It's kind of a vicinity map of Perrineville Creek area. You can see I-5 and 405 on the right side of the figure. And in the middle of the figure, there's a yellow line and a green line. And that's the boundary between the city of Edmonds to the left and the city of Linwood to the right. So Perrineville Creek is what I call kind of a lost orphan. Nobody wants to really claim it because the city of Linwood feels, well, the water's in Edmonds, it's their problem, not ours. And Edmonds does want to do it because it's Linwood's water coming onto their property or into the city right away there. But the drainage basin itself is about 3 square miles. So it's a pretty significant drainage basin. Those blue little balloons that you see there in the center are actually, if you go on the Adopt a Stream website, there's photographs for each of those. If you blew it up, they kind of spread out. And there were pictures looking upstream, downstream, where uh, Tom Murdoch had walked the entire stream and photographed it. So there is some evidence, even though that's probably a little bit dated. But what's important to note here is that from like Lindale Park on down, it drops pretty steeply until you get to Talbot Road, which is right about there, and then it flattens out. So all of the erosional materials that come down there get moved along through the creek until it flattens out right at the mouth of Perrinville Creek. The water slows down, and then the sediment and rock drop out. And so that's one of the basic problems that the city has with this uh, creek. There's a little. This is Lunds Gulch Creek just to the north as a comparison. And a couple of years or 4 or 5 years ago, the city, or excuse me, the Snohomish County uh, helped fund this railroad trestle bridge over the creek, which restored the bed load and stream flow and made it more of a natural system that was before it was always having problems being cleaned out, just like Perrinville Creek. So this is a one of the solutions, probably the preferred solution that needs to be done at Perrinville Creek. The problem is nobody wants to pay for it. Uh, This is Lund's Gulch Creek Basin. It's about 5.5 square miles compared to Perrinville Creek Basin, which is, like I said, about 3 square miles shown in orange there. But then on top of that, with already undersized system, the city added another zero point 0.2 square miles of stormwater runoff via a 30-inch pipe that it constructed in 2012. So not only was it undersized before, but it was even worse off after the city went back in 2012 and added additional flow to the pipe. Uh, this is a kind of a picture of Lower Perrinville Creek. Talbot Road runs along right through here, and the high flow bypass structures are right there. And Perrinville Creek is kind of shown here in the white line coming through here. So that gives you an idea of what we're looking at. And then here's Puget Sound out there in Browns Bay in that area. This is a photo of the Talbot Road, Perrinville Creek area from when was that? 1947, an aerial photograph. And you can see uh, the outfall there. I've added that blue line to kind of show where the creek was. And you can see Olympic View Drive with that little horseshoe boundary in there. So this is what it looked like back in 1947 when a lot of the pipes were put in. You can see the BNSF railroad tracks. They've been there since the 1890s, so they've been there forever. But there was kind of right in this area here, you can kind of see a kind of a notch there uh, uh, the alluvial fan was in historically in that area. Now, fast forward to today, this is what the site looks like. Almost all of those lots, urban development, suburban development you see there were constructed before there was any storm flow control requirements. So there's very little stormwater detention coming off of Linwood, and it's almost all impervious surface with the exception of Southwest County Park and Lindale Park and a few other areas in there that are still forested, but most of it is either roofs, pavement, or lawns with high runoff rates and no flow control. This is a status report that the City of Edmonds did back in 2023, where they estimated the cost of fixing the problems in Perrinville Creek at $7 million. And that's probably on the low side today. Uh, the city did hire a consultant. They spent a couple $100,000, or I think actually $900,000 to start the design. And they got about $10,000 into the design of their fix with some preliminary costs and estimates. And the city decided not to move forward with it and basically put the kibosh on doing any additional work in that area. Uh, this is a blow up of that area there. You can see Talbot Road here coming through here. Here's Perrinville Creek. And what's important to note here is this house here, 8307, was constructed in 1975 in a floodplain, a zone floodplain. And then additionally, a second house was constructed in 1986, also in the floodplain of that area. And so there's really four issues here that I'll talk about today. One is the 30-inch concrete pipe that belongs to the Burlington Northern that was probably put in, I don't know, maybe back in the 1940, 50s time era. Uh, there's the 42-inch ductile iron pipe that the city put in 1995 as part of that addition of zero point 0.2 square miles of, excuse me, runoff area into it. Then there's the fish barrier flow splitters that were constructed in 1995, also as part of that same system. And then lastly, the undersized and also fish barrier culvert underneath Perrinville Creek. At the hearing, the city's attorney wouldn't allow me to speak to issue four on there. They didn't want to get into that. And so we only covered issues one through three, even though we did sneak a little bit in during the appeal hearing of the city's hydraulic project approval permit, its HPA permit. So in June 2022, the city council awarded the professional service agreement $900,000 to do the study. That this is the one that the city stopped working on because they didn't want to spend the money. Obviously, the city has its financial problems, but some financial problems can't be ignored or let go. They have to really be addressed. Uh, and all four of the issues I just kind of referenced are important in the SEPA determination. This drawing here is from the Army Corps of Engineers permit for the 42-inch pipe that was added by the city in 1995 time frame. This is about the best drawing that the city has because the city didn't keep its design drawings. And so they have no record of how that was actually built. But they had an Army Corps of Engineers permit to do that pipe underneath the railroad tracks. So you can see the railroad tracks are over here, and then this is the riprap going down, and then here are the two flow splitters on the right here. This is a broken scale. It's kind of a standard engineering design, so it exaggerates the vertical scale so it's not so flat, and so you can see what's going on. It's really not that steep, but it on for design purposes, it's easier to view it that way. So you just have to remember that the horizontal scale is different than the vertical scale when you look at a drawing like that. So these are the four issues that I'll talk about: the reinforced concrete pipe underneath the railroad tracks, the ductile iron pipe underneath the railroad tracks, the two flow splitters, and the fish barrier under Talbot Road. And you can see here, whoops, go back. Uh, Here's the culvert underneath Talbot Road, and you can see the contours are pretty tight up here. So this is pretty steep coming through here. But then when you get down into this area, you can see the contour line spread way out. So there's a lot more room. That's a lot flatter down there. And this is where all the sediment tends to drop out. So I'll talk about the 30-inch concrete pipe first. This is a picture that I took back in 2012 of the pipe in June. And you can see the pipe is flowing pretty close to half full, which is not a good sign for sizing of a pipe to carry a 100-year storm event in the winter. Uh, After I'd rattled a few cages at the city back in 2012, the city actually hired an outfit to go in and video inspect the pipe. They inspected the railroad's pipe, I think kind of by accident. They didn't realize that they're not responsible for the maintenance of it, but they videoed it anyway. And you can see a large crack in the pipe there. And if you look here in this pipe picture here, you can see a large deflection joint that's opened up in the top of the pipe. and then you can see the rebar that's corroded in there. So this picture here is 13 years old. As far as I know, nobody's gone back in there and re-inspected it. Or if they did, they haven't made the railroad hasn't shared their information on that. But with the railroad loads on top of that, that wasn't a good sign, and I guarantee you that culvert hasn't gotten better with age in the last 13 years since this picture was taken. Um, this is a picture that I was given back in July of 2023. This is the outfall of that 36-inch pipe, and it's probably pretty much what it looks like today. The city cut off all the flow to that pipe after the December 2020 storm. And so it's basically plugged up with beach sand, the littoral drift that comes along the shoreline there. And so without flow to keep the pipe open, it just plugs up. So I imagine today it probably looks pretty much like that. Um, there is a federal law, 49 CFR, that requires pipes to be designed to carry the anticipated flow from the area that they're serving. But the Federal Railroad Administration has not seen fit to enforce that requirement on the railroad. And so there no federal agency, even though they're aware of it, is bothered to require that it be fixed. Uh, Back in the summer of 2023, I kind of got on it, the Federal Railroad Administration's back about this, and they finally got BNSF to jet the pipe out, but it plugged up right away after the fact. But you can see here this ecology block, this big overgrown Lego block, concrete block for a retaining wall, and then there's the railroad tracks right above it. So that gives you an idea of how close the railroad tracks are to Puget Sound at this location. And so high tide is about where the arrow is there on the photograph.
Mm.
This is a picture that of the pipe that I got from the Federal Railroad Inspector, Brian Alito. And he said, "Oh yeah, it's all great and everything." And I said, "Yeah, but did they look at the rebar, the corroded rebar?" And that picture that I showed you where the corroded rebar is where the little red arrow is pointing to. And of course, they just looked at it and said, "Oh, it looks fine to us," and so they just left it, even though you can see the rust stains in the photograph there that um, the pipe is deteriorating and not going to be able to carry the railroad loads above. And so the pipe is structurally deficient and it's also hydraulically deficient that it can't even carry a 10-year storm event. And so that means there's probably a 10% chance in any given year that if the water were to flow through there, it would overtop the railroad tracks and potentially wash out the tracks. This is a photo looking east from the Burlington Northern Railroad's culvert, the 30 inch culvert that's there, and you can see the two houses there that are located um, in the background there. And today, all of that flow has been cut off. And so there's no flow coming through there. So roughly 300 feet from about here to over past the flagpole there, or actually back in this area here, the water would flow, used to flow right up next to this house and right along the backyard of the house. The next thing I'll talk about, issue two, is a 42-inch ductile iron pipe. This is a picture of the outfall of the city's pipe. This is the one that was added in the 1990s for the additional flow and to basically solve the flooding problem. That these houses had flooding problems back in the 1990s because they didn't construct a berm that was required. And the uh, city, to help them out, decided at public expense to put in the two flow splitters that they're now required to maintain. And they also put the pipe in 1995. This was a steel pipe. There's no corrosion protection. And you can see in this close-up of that pipe from 2012, this picture I took, the steel was badly delaminated. You can see there that it's corroding through due to salt water because it's in and out of salt water twice a day, which is probably the absolute worst condition for structural steel to be in. And at that point in time, I wrote the city a letter and in so many words said, hey, you better think about replacing this pipe pretty soon and put it into your budget because it's starting to fail. And of course, nothing happened. Um, but there were no holes in the pipe in 2012. Uh, the city, after I sent that letter in, did a video inspection, but the consultant they hired really didn't know what they were doing, and the pictures they took really didn't come out, and it really didn't show much of anything in there. So in 2022, after the storm, I went back out and looked at it again, and you can see now there's a hole that's opened up in the pipe. And so this is 10 years later, and the hole is about the size of a business card. I laid my business card out there for scale, and then you can see the a transverse crack in the pipe where the pipe is actually starting to buckle and break off. And so if you see that on the outside, you can better bet that there's problems on the inside too. So I again wrote the city another letter urging them to do another video inspection of their pipe. And so these are some current photographs, or current being 3 years old now, of there. But you can see where the the rail loads are. This picture happens to show containers going across their city's pipe, but that could easily be tanker cars full of explosive bulk and crude oil heading up to Anacortes, or it could be an Amtrak train that could derail and go right into the sound here. And so the water depth here would be about 5 or 6 feet if a train went off into the sound. And of course, if a locomotive went in there, there's thousands of gallons of diesel on the electric motors. But that's about the extreme high tide in that area there. So it's pretty significant issue there where the railroad had actually filled out into the sound a little bit to construct that little stretch of the rail tracks back in the 1890s. So after I wrote the second letter to the city, uh, they went back in July of 2023 and videotaped it. And I, through a public records request, got this got the video, the actual video of their inspection. And I uh, made a still clip of the rock that was protruding through the crack in the pipe underneath the railroad tracks. Uh, it's pretty obvious that's railroad ballast rock. It's angular rock. If you make a fist, that's about the size of the rock of railroad ballast rock in there, and it's actually leaking through. So I kind of, my argument is it's like playing Jenga that you can pull blocks out and the tower stands, but you pull enough blocks out and the tower can collapse. My concern here, and that I expressed to the hearing examiner in the appeal of the city's HPA permit SEPA determination, is that you really can't determine from the surface that a void is starting to form underneath the railroad tracks because when those rocks drop into the pipe, they just get washed out into the beach and disappear in the sand. And so it's possible that you could have a void open up underneath the railroad tracks, and then with the vibration of the locomotive coming along, cause the rock to shift enough that it could displace the tracks and cause a derailment into Puget Sound. The city argued that no, it's fine. That's not a problem. We don't see it being a problem. And so that's kind of where the hearing ended on that. But you can see the barnacle growth in there. So you know that if barnacles are growing there, it's submerged under salt water quite a bit of the time. So twice a day, that pipe is submerged in salt water and then out in air. And so that's the best for corrosion. So after the cities hired Aquilus to do the inspection, they did this inspection report, and they made no mention of where that hole was, which was 93 feet west of the manhole by the railroad tracks. this is an email clip that I got through a public records request, and this was from then Oscar Antillen, who was the public works director. And quoting him, I says, I don't want to highlight the fact that we created this problem and we have struggled to fix it. And so he wanted to highlight the restoration project and not the fact that the city created this problem and literally cannot fix the problem that the city created now. Uh, this, the public works director also sent this email to Diane Buckshenis and David Tinsel on the city council after the inspection that I had basically rattled the city's cage on to get them to do. And they said, yep, the pipe's fine, not a problem. And I say, you guys have to be nuts if you think that. So there was a draft memorandum about the fish barriers. Uh, the city references a 32-inch culvert. That's wrong because it's 30-inch. They don't make concrete pipe in 32-inch dimensions. But the city did acknowledge even back in 2023 that their pipe was undersized. But I don't think the city ever finalized their draft memorandum. Now I'm going to move on to issue three, which is the actual flow splitters. This is a picture I took of the flow splitters back in 2010, the first time I laid eyes on it. And you can see that it's basically a big concrete box, and then there's like a catch basin hole in the middle of each box. You can't see it over here, but the other one's similar to it. And what happens is as that water slows down in the flatlands just before it goes out into Puget Sound, all this rock drops out. And in turn, this flow splitter supposedly was supposed to let the low flows go through to the property to the south, and uh, the high flows, when there was a big storm, would flow into the to the side channels. But what would happen is that it would plug up and all the water would flow into the homes, and the homeowners kept complaining. So they had the city at taxpayer expense go out and keep maintaining these culverts. The city doesn't keep tabs on how much they spend on it, but I could bet it's probably in the 50 to $100,000 range for the amount of manpower and crew time and equipment time the city has to spend maintaining these for basically two homes that the city permitted in a floodplain. This is from a study that was done by Herrera for the city back in 2009, and it shows the Perrineville, or the area that was added to the flow. So in about 2012, the city added additional flow to it. Originally, uh, the flow splitters are right up here in this drawing here. Here's Talbot Road, and then the two homes that were in question are here and here. And the city had originally designed the outfall to go over here and come out right at the Burlington Northern uh, uh, pipe. But this homeowner here objected to it, didn't want the pipe going across his property. So instead, the city routed the pipe all the way up here to the flow splitter. And this is a cross section of what the flow splitter looks like, or looked like when they shortly after they constructed it. And so the stream bed is right up here now, close to the top of uh, this overflow, and the water would spill in, go down into this catch basin, and then out to Puget Sound. And then in 2012, the city added another 125 acres of runoff into it and added a pipe that comes in at the left-hand side. I'll skip through some of these here. This is the engineering schematic or drawing of it. This is a picture that I took back in 2012, looking to the east towards Talbot Road from the flow splitters. So that's the easterly flow splitter in the foreground of that picture. And this is right after the city had laid the pipe. So there's a 30-inch concrete pipe that's buried underground there. You can see the ground has been dug up, and they got the erosion control fabric around the area there. And then they actually put in a manhole there. And then this was a year later where the grass has grown up, and you can see the where the pipe uh, came in at. And this is a fish barrier here. The fish can't come up through that area. There's bars across it, and it's about a 10-foot gap between the bottom of the catch basin and the stream bed above. So it's not impossible for fish to get through there, but it's probably 99.9% of them are going to die in there. And in turn, what will happen is if there's water flowing out this pipe, the fish are likely to go up this pipe, and then when the storm stops, the fish will die in the pipe, and then they get washed out back out to Puget Sound, and nobody knows that or is the wiser because the fish have all been killed and flushed out into Puget Sound. And so this is some of the bed load rock accumulation. This is looking to the west towards the railroad tracks. You can see the railroad tracks right there, and then Puget Sound beyond. And so this is where the water flows through right now. And this was taken in June, and you can see it's an overflow. Water's flowing over the top because the city hasn't maintained the stream bed to keep the rock out. And so the rock is blocking up the passage to the channel below, and the water is going into overflow, and there's really no way for fish to get up there. Uh, Back in 2023, when the city inspected their steel pipe, they also inspected the HDPE, high density polyethylene, basically plastic pipe that came out of the flow splitter, and it was 25% block cross-sectional block with rock in it. This is an inspection report on it that documented that. I did some calculations on it. I won't run through all the calculations with you, but basically, I estimated that if you didn't count the rock that would come into it during a storm, that in a 100-year storm event, this could only carry a 30.5 CFS flow in it. Uh, and so along comes the December 2020 storm. Herrera, or not Herrera, uh, Pentec used, or Shannon and Wilson did some calculations uh, that they basically borrowed from Pentec, who borrowed them from R.W. Beck consultants from 1991. And they estimated that the flow in that pipe was 225, or excuse me, the flow from the Perrineville Creek for the 100-year storm event would be 225 cubic feet per second versus what I estimate it could actually carry, which is about 33.3 cubic feet per second. So if you throw in the bed load, it's easily undersized by a factor of 10. And the Edmonds Public Works knew or should have known when they added additional flow that they were already making a bad situation worse. So along comes the December 2020 storm that flooded the area there. And these are some pictures that I got from the Edmonds Public Works via public records request. You can see the flooding going on in that area. You can see the flow splitter is completely full of sediment. These are the crew working overnight trying to excavate it out on an emergency basis with a backhoe and dump truck in there. This is a picture of the two homes backyard that I took with their permission back in 2012. And you can see they have this lovely English garden with a salmon stream flowing through it. Uh, I just dearly love to have a salmon stream in my backyard. But the problem is the stream comes up to right here, makes a 90-degree bend, which is natural, and flows right along the backside of this house that Mr. McLaughlin now owns. And so they got the creek right up next to the house, which you can look out your bedroom window at night and see the salmon running up there uh, when the stream was still open. So after the December 2020 storm, and you can also see how it's all fertilized and nice, not a dandelion in sight. So obviously they're using herbicides and pesticides to right next to a salmon stream, which is probably not a very good idea, and it's not shaded with natural vegetation. So, as part of the building permit for these two houses, there was supposed to have been a berm constructed that never was. And so, this is a map of the critical areas in that area that there was a wetland where that cross hatching is shown, but the wetland's all been basically filled in. So the property owners have filled in the wetland that was in the floodplain in that area. And this is the same area. This is from the FEMA flood insurance rate map, the firm map. And I've kind of highlighted and clouded in there showing where this area is. And so there you can see there the railroad tracks show going through the floodplain, even though they're elevated. And that's where these two houses are flooding in a mapped floodplain. So what happens when you build in a floodplain? Well, these are before and after pictures taken by the city of Edmonds. You can see some of these footprints here. And basically the whole stream filled in with sediment after that 2020 storm. So what did the city do? Pretty much nothing. What they did was they totally blocked off all the flow uh, to the 300 feet downstream of the flow splitter. And so now all the flow must go through the high flow bypass. When they did that, they basically made it fish impassable. It's two things happen, or there's several things that happen here. One is the coho salmon can't spawn back, and even though Joe Scordino had and through his school project had released coho salmon in this stream to try and rehabilitate the stream, the coho all died because they couldn't get back in. This picture here was a year after the 2020 storm event. So this picture was November 2021, and you can see how the flooding's going on. And you can see all the sediment that's been blocked up there by the city and not removed. And so 1 year after the storm event, um, the city started to try and get the homeowners to do it. The homeowners basically weren't willing to do it. This is from the original short plat for those two homes. And you can see in there where the creek is, it says stream on there. There used to be a fish ladder in this area back in the uh, early 1980s that was taken out. And so all of uh, the the wetland, the fish ladder, fish passage was removed so that they could put in that nice English garden. They were also supposed to construct a berm at 21.5 feet. That berm was never constructed. And so that's when the city, or when back in the late 1990s, when the homeowners started getting to the city who were basically rich and well politically connected to build the flow splitters to protect their two houses that had been permitted in a floodplain. So um, I'll kind of go through some of these kind of fast. The spot elevations document that. I'll kind of skip through some of the studies here. Uh, this map or area here shows that the properties. Mr. Bernhoft was a private individual who filed the appeal of the property, and then there's a Flynn property, which is just upstream. The flow splitters are actually located in a stormwater easement on the Flynn property. Then there's the McLaughlin property and the Robinson property here. And so the stream flows along here. The flow splitters are actually right there. And this is that 90-degree bend at the McLaughlin Robinson property where the stream goes in there. What's important about this picture is that um, the two property owners have also encroached out into the Burlington Northern right of way. And so not only did they fill the land on their property, they also filled land on the railroad property. And of course, whenever you go onto the railroad right away, there's always a risk of injury. Railroads are pretty uptight about people trespassing on their right of way because they can get hurt by cars or things flying off of cars, rail cars. And so the railroad and the Federal Railroad Administration have not taken any action, even though I've called this um to their attention on a number of emails that they've encroached into the right of way, and it's potentially a safety hazard. So this is a picture of December 2023 of a city worker removing rock by hand out of the flow splitter. Uh, as of the February 14, 2024, that's when the city's last HPA permit, regular HPA permit, expired. And so to do this kind of work, you have to have an HPA permit to be legal. And so I kind of call this picture bailing Puget Sound out with a bucket because that's about what it's like. They're trying to shovel that rock out. It's just going to, as soon as he walks away, everything he shoveled is going to go right back into the hole and potentially block that up, block the flow splitter up. But again, you can see with that cage around it, the bars, the 10-foot vertical drop, there's no way for fish to get into the creek to spawn. So February 13, 2024, that's when the last regular permit expired. Since then, the city has was or to get another HPA permit, the city had to obtain or do a SEPA determination, basically a determination of non-significance or something along those lines, or a mitigated determination of non-significance. Mr. Bernhoft appealed the city's DNS in May of 2024, and we didn't have the hearing until January, February of 2025. But what the city did was they applied for an expedited HPA permit, which is different than a regular HPA permit. The expedited HPA permit is required uh, or is usually used for emergencies. This is a big flood or whatever, where here the city is doing routine maintenance. And basically, this allowed the city to bypass the SEPA requirement to do an environmental determination. And so you can see the backhoe there. One of the requirements of their expedited HPA permit was to take pictures. And I got this picture from the WDFW, and you can see they've got the track hoe in the water there, uh, which they're not supposed to have done, but they didn't do that anyway. And so at the hearing, the city argued that the hole was not under the railroad track wasn't a problem, but on March 31st of 2025, the hearing examiner found in our favor and said, yes, it is a concern, and the city needs to go back and redo their DNS. So in the last year and a half or so, the city has not done anything, as far as I know, to remedy the problem. It did go back and hire a land surveyor in July of 2025, who confirmed that the pipe under the hole was under the railroad tracks where I said, but the city has since then has done nothing to my knowledge. So I've contacted basically every agency in the alphabet soup of federal and state agencies, the Federal Railroad Administration, the congressionals, tribes, the Corps, WDFW, the Washington Utilities Commission. I filed complaints with the Board of Registration for Professional Engineers. I've contacted state senators, and I've contacted the city of Edmonds. I've given this presentation to several people, and then several city council persons, and then also the Burlington Northern Railroad. And essentially, the answer I've gotten from everybody is nobody wants to do anything until somebody else does it. So everybody wants somebody else to figure out a way to pay for it. And obviously, our environmentally aware president is not going to lift a finger for a woke state like Washington to help protect a bunch of dumb fish. And so there's no federal money involved or available at this point in time. I've got a war to pay for, I guess, and other important things. And the city is broke. They don't want to pay for it. Uh, the railroad doesn't want to pay for it because it's not their pipe, it's the city's pipe. And so what's going to happen is that this is going to continue on until there's a disaster, and then I guess you can declare an act of God or something. But it's well known, and their city's own surveyor documented where the hole was 93 feet away. Um, Back in 2025, last September, the city got another HPA permit, but it's not making any uh, progress to resolve the problem. And as far as I know, uh, the state Fish and Wildlife will issue another expedited HPA again next September for the city to continue doing routine maintenance without a SEPA determination. And so there is a bill SB 6154 too that the League of Women Voters might be interested in tracking. It died in committee this year, but it basically was something that was introduced, I think, for the city's benefit to allow them to do mitigation on another creek so they can continue maintaining their fish killing flow splitter on Perrineville Creek. And this is a terrible bill because doing maintenance on another creek will not help out the fish problem in Perrineville Creek. They need to do the mitigation in Perrineville Creek, not some other creek in the city. The last issue that I'll talk about here is the fish blockage at Talbot Road. And these are some pictures. I'm going to kind of skip through some of these just to move it along. This is the outfall of the concrete pipe underneath the Talbot Road, and you can see there's quite a drop there into that little plunge pool at the base of the pipe. And this is also considered a fish blockage too. The city wouldn't allow us to talk about this or bring this up at the hearing, so this was excluded, but it was in my report. This was a picture from the December 2020 storm showing the water overtopping Talbot Road from Perrineville Creek. And so it's really obvious that that pipe is undersized hydraulically, and it's a fish blockage in there. The city paid probably a fair amount of money to Herrera Consultants in 2012 to design a box culvert under Talbot Road, and this is a copy of the design on there that shows where uh, the red line shows where the pipe is, and the black lines show where the box culvert would be. This is a cross section of the box culvert that Herrera designed underneath Talbot Road, and you can see the road grade up above here. And that's the existing Talbot Road pipes for comparison. And so this would be that colored section, that highlighted section that comes up would be the new flow area. So you can see how much larger that flow needs to be, cross-sectional area needs to be to carry the flow and the bed load through underneath the road. Something similar, probably even larger than that, would be required down at the railroad tracks too. Uh, the city estimated this cost in 2012 at $590,000. I'd be surprised today if you could build that for $2 million. So costs have just gone up, but the city has twiddled its thumbs and allowed the flooding to occur. They're lucky they didn't lose the road, in my opinion, in the 2020 storm event. So the potential for loss of life is real. This is a picture I took out of the Herald that where three people were killed in Montana. This was an Amtrak derailment out in the flatlands, prairies of Montana. Um, and the NTSB reported that BNSF had a shortcoming in safety culture at that time. I don't think anything's really changed that much. That you wait for the disaster to before you act. So now imagine this scene in Browns Bay at high tide at the night in wintertime in a storm. And you can imagine that the loss of life would be pretty significant if an Amtrak train went into the drink at that point. So it can be done. This is a picture again of Lund's Gulch Creek in the county's intertidal habitat that was created there. Something very similar to this needs to be done on those two properties that I just talked about. Uh, we're just one atmospheric river away from disaster. We've been lucky that the storms have gone north or south and haven't really hit like they did back in December 2020. But it's just a matter of time that the clock's ticking on that. So I concluded that an EIS was warranted, uh, uh, that they need to address the fact that they've got the hole in there. The city won't acknowledge that it's a problem. Um, the pipes blocked and not passing the sediment through. A trestle would allow the sediment to naturally move through and not cost the taxpayers in Edmonds any money once it's created. Uh, but the culverts that are there now can't even or convey a 10-year storm event. And over 33 years, the city has done nothing. Um, the city is aware that it's illegally blocking the 300 feet of Perrineville Creek, but since the state won't enforce the law, the city can continue to uh, maintain and keep its fish killing flow splitters in place. But if the city did do an EIS, it would determine who would be responsible for the restoration of Lower Perrineville Creek. It would evaluate alternative solutions and costs, come up with a realistic schedule and budget, which the city doesn't have, and evaluate the life safety risks of the continued maintenance of the flow splitter. So 6154 is the bill I referenced, and this is the one that died in committee. But hopefully it won't be reintroduced. But if it is reintroduced in the next session, I sure hope there's a hue and cry from the public to not pass this bill and defeat that bill. So what's ahead? The city of Edmonds is still pushing the Senate Bill 6154. We can expect another expedited HPA permit to continue maintaining the flow killing fish structure. And what we need right now is citizen pressure on the city to force removal of the fish killing flow splitter and restore Perrineville Creek. So with that, that's the conclusion of my presentation.
Wow, Bill, thank you so much for all the thoroughness that you went through. There's still a bunch of terms going through my head that I'm exactly what is in the EIS again, environmental
Impact statement.
impact statement. So,
Yeah, that's basically a big document that's pretty much reserved for large projects. Uh, there could still be environmental impacts, mitigated and unmitigated, but they have to be identified. And the city doesn't want to identify the impacts because, in turn, they become very liable for like a rail disaster. If there was a derailment of fuel cars into Puget Sound, or heaven forbid, a Amtrak train loaded with people at that point, then the city would have a financial liability because it knew and failed to act. And so you can play dumb and say, well, we didn't know, and so that's kind
I'm
of what
surprised. I think the other thing that surprises me greatly is that Burlington Northern isn't a chief actor in this, in trying to get the city to provide a safe rail passage through that area.
I agree. Under the terms, I, I've asked the city that normally when you put a pipe or do anything on the railroad tracks, like a private utility, if you want to run water line or a sewer line under the railroad tracks, the railroad has to give you a special permit to do that. And one of the terms in the permit is that uh, if you don't maintain it, the railroad can go in and maintain it for you at your cost and send you the bill. Apparently, as far as I can tell, the city never executed or signed an agreement with the railroad to that effect. And so the railroad has been reluctant to do it because they don't want to incur the cost of repairing the city's culvert by putting in a trestle. They want somebody else to pay for it. And so I've been told that the rail cars have slowed down and just creep along that section of track right now, so they're not going very fast to try and mitigate the damage. But that hole that we saw in the pipe from 3 years ago, I guarantee you is bigger today than it was the other day, and the steel is thinner because it's continuing to corrode. And so at some point in time, it's going to get to the point where it's going to collapse. And then it's going to become a real problem because if the railroad's culvert's blocked and the steel pipe becomes blocked, then Perrineville Creek's going to fill up real quick and wash out that track. And so why the railroad hasn't acted on that is beyond me, but that's been the case. And they are well aware of it. I've got emails to document it where they've been notified and have decided they didn't want to do anything.
Bill, you know that the county was on Creek,
Right.
and they worked hard to create a coordinated effort financially with the tribes, with Burlington Northern, um, as well as the county monies that went into that. So it was not just a single effort there, and um, it takes it takes somebody. Is there anybody at the city level? In this case, it was County Natural Resources Chair that really worked hard on that. And then there were grants. Of course, there were grants at that time, and there are still grants out there. Whether or not they can be applied in this case, that takes some insight. But is there any individual who has caught that environmental fervor? Margie might know this too, at the city of Edmonds, that would make that kind of coordination possible?
Not to my knowledge. I've contacted the mayor. I've kind of stopped bothering trying to contact Public Works because they never respond back. I did send the mayor an email that he acknowledged, a couple of months ago that Ecology did have some grant money available for restoring stream flows where there had been blockage, and it sounded like it was written perfectly for this project. And I passed it on to the mayor, and he acknowledged receiving it. But whether the city actually went forward and applied for the grant, I don't know. Uh, the city of Edmonds is having trouble, funding its salaries for its staff and laid off, I think, 20% of the city staff. So whether they actually pursued it or not, I don't know. But I did see that, passed it on to them. Right now, of course, money's tight. The federal government's not doing much in the environmental arena. The tribes don't have the money to do this. And so everybody's waiting for somebody else to act, and there's no money out there. And so I guess we just have to wait until there's a rail disaster for something to happen or for people to act because the agencies have the clout to enforce it and enforce replacement, but haven't done it.
The other thing that occurs to me, to do something similar to what happened at Lunds Gulch, um, I can't imagine that those property owners with their English gardens would be overly thrilled to have that happening in their backyards.
Yeah. Well, the other option, if for me, being the environmental kind of person I am, I'd love to have an intertidal habitat in my backyard and have, ducks and salmon coming up naturally in that area there. But if, The other option is if they're unwilling to allow that, uh, the city does have condemnation powers. And so you can actually do a property take on that, but then that raises the price of the project because then you have to pay for the cost of the land that you take as part of the condemnation to build a stormwater facility on their property. So it can be done by the city, but again, that just increases the price if you got an unwilling seller. And uh, so again, it's a situation that nobody wants to do anything. I guess you wait and then you collect the insurance money from the city's liability insurance policy if something happens. But of course, that doesn't restore people's lives if somebody's injured or harmed or killed because of a derailment. And it's certainly not going to help the fish and the wildlife in Browns Bay. There was one of the pictures in there that I showed that had brant geese out there feeding in the right offshore. And when you see that, that's a good example of eelgrass. The picture I have up on my screen right now, you can see eelgrass in that picture, well, kind of what it looks like. And that eelgrass provides critical habitat for a threatened Chinook salmon that, historically, that when the salmon came, the little salmon fry came down the Skagit and Snohomish rivers, they would uh, kind of transition in the brackish intertidal waters at the mouths of these rivers, uh, and they'd kind of go in and out of salt water until their gills got acclimatized, and then would go out to sea to become big salmon that would spawn back up in the creeks. Well, we filled in all those intertidal habitats for the most part along Puget Sound, so that now the salmon, Chinook salmon, the primary prey species of the orca, uh, congregate in these brackish waters at the mouths of these little Puget Sound streams like Perrinville Creek. You're not going to catch a 50-pound Chinook salmon in Perrinville Creek, but you can find these little salmon fry out in the eelgrass that's shown in that photograph or that picture here. And so if you eliminate that, you have eliminated, critical habitat in the life cycle of the Chinook salmon. And so if you like orcas and you like Chinook salmon, that's just another reason why we need to protect these little coastal streams along Puget Sound.
Oh, that's for sure, Bill. I want to thank you are there other questions? I've been sort of monopolizing the questions here and let others. Margie, I'm sure she drinks her